I can speak from experience from this, Ben, because my first purchase, I bought in tenants in common with my mentor at the time back in 1999, and I was 20% owner, and the mentor was 80% owner. All right, so it wasn't even half a share. Bang, disqualified me from first home owners grants. Right, which was
and I was one of the fortunate ones, Bryce.
Yeah.
That got $10,000 in my first. I think, was it 10 or was it 14? I can't remember. So long ago. But yes, so I was able to get the first homeowners grant because I did actually buy the house across the road from mum and dad, and I lived in it. I moved in to obviously meet the criteria, and then when I moved interstate for work, I then rented it out, and I rented it out for about 5 to 6 years, and then stupidly sold it.
Oh, I was going to say, mate, that'd be worth a fortune now. You still got it. Is it a great story?
Yeah, no, I think it's the unrealized gains are probably now sitting at around $800,000.
Yeah, wow. All right.
Anyway, we digress. So let's talk about some of the things. So we do know that there are first buyers incentives, and they are things like grants, stamp duty concessions, saving schemes, all these different types of things that can allow you to get onto the property ladder. And we think that that's great in terms of what that story does. Now, in terms of the federal initiative, that's pretty clear in terms of that. Now, the treatment at a state-by-state level, there sometimes can be some grey areas. So to the point that I was, when Bryce and I spoke about this sort of example a couple of days ago, I have an example of someone I know where they were successful in getting that grant. Now, again, it was a long time ago where the female party to that application had not received any grants and so forth, but the male to that party he'd already owned a home previously. He wasn't owning a home at the time, so that they didn't have a home at the time, and that happened in Western Australia. And so whether that was a self-declaration and it wasn't checked, or whether Western Australia had those rules in place, is an important one. And that's why I always say that here's the regulation that I'm reading as well, Giovanni, but I'd always clarify that because it can be a little vague in some respects. So I'm jumping on the State Revenue Office or whatever and ringing them and saying, here's our scenario. What does that look like? What sort of concessions might we be able to? And of course, your investment savvy broker who does this all the time, your broker should know this backwards, especially, if they're dealing in particular states, if you've got a local broker, but if you've got a broker who's also across it, or you've got a big team of brokers like we do, they know the rules.
I think that's important, right? Because 2 points you said there. Use a professional who's dealing with it all the time, and go and look in the finer details yourself. But let's give some general guidelines.
Yes, please.
For people to have conversation starters with the people that they want to talk about. So first of all of these incentives generally have a spouse test, right? So that's the first part, the first gate. And if either spouse, including de factos, have ever owned residential property in Australia, then generally speaking, neither of you are considered first home buyers for the purpose of the grants and concessions, not for the purpose of having a conversation with your friends to say, I've never owned a house before, so therefore I am a first home buyer. Tick. That's but for the purpose of getting access to some moolah, Ben, to help you with these grants, you are considered that you are not considered.
Correct. And I can also tell you because first homeowners grants have been around for a couple of decades, if not longer now, probably 30 years. Back in the day also, I know of examples where if you'd owned an investment property, but you actually hadn't owned an owner-occupied home, you could actually get access to the grant. So this is where I think, over time, the governments have tightened that legislation and those rules. So it really is, again, do the research with your broker, and then obviously, if you're not quite sure, a phone call.
Let's 3 minutes about the good old days. Remember the good old days when you used to buy a property in this country before GST was introduced, and every single property you purchased was cash flow positive in most cases. Remember the days when there was no capital gains tax? So we could do that for a while. But the point is that it's gone from not a lot of people talking about investment property to now social media has meant that everyone is, well, that's a big statement, isn't it? Lots and lots of people are exposed to investment property as an alternative. So I find it interesting. We had this conversation, you and I, yesterday. We were talking about a trust back in the noughties, Ben, and you went and spoke to your accountant. Tell that story. I think it's important.
Oh yeah, it's a good one, right? So I was obviously an enthusiastic amateur in my first decade of property investing, and I was reading everything, consuming the magazines and whatever is about at the time, and I came across a book, how to legally reduce your tax when investing in property. Ed Chan and
Melbourne,
the old Chan and Naylor sort of business at the time. I'm trying to think of the other Martin, someone or whatever. Tony Melvin. That's right. Thank you. They had a hybrid property investment trust structure, which meant that I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, this is incredible. The lower income earner can receive the income. The capital gain, and the higher income can receive the income benefit or the negative gearing benefit. Wow, what an amazing hybrid trust!
Smart.
And they had a private ruling on it, and so I ring my accountant and said, "This is going to be big, Clinton. I mean, every man and his dog's going to get into this particular scheme." And he said, "Yeah, and that'll be the downfall of it."
Yeah.
And so he gave me some of the best advice I'd received from my new accountant, because remember, it was the old accountant that basically told me to sell my property to buy an off-the-plan apartment when I bought my first property back in the early or late 1990s. Okay, so here we are. And so he just said they'll change it. And, over time, they've tweaked family trusts and, to distribute income and all of those other things. So the more something becomes mainstream and the more that the ATO loses revenue or is not gaining revenue for the government, they will tweak it. And so that's exactly what's happened now. Distributions through a family trust to a minor used to be $3,000. Now it's $300. So it's not even worth it because you've got the paperwork to get it all done. So there are some examples that we always say. So the government intentionally want to do this for people who are buying their very first home. But if you have bought another property, you're probably not ineligible now. And then to Bryce's point, the spouse test says actually you've already got a foot in the door on the property market, so you should be okay.
So a couple of the little important things. In this case, Giovanni has already purchased in the past, even though the partner hasn't. So therefore, in our view, they would be disqualified. Go and check with your professional, but in our view, they would be
and check with your state. Yep.
And state, a couple of important nuances here is that you've flagged this, Ben, is that state-based discrepancy. So that's why you want to test that. There's only one potential workaround, is that if the partner buys individually and declares themselves separate, so you guys are separate, there might be an opportunity there that you would look at, but again, you need to get some advice around that. But double check the fine print on that. So in our view, your partner won't qualify. So here's the key takeaways. It is a common misconception that I've bought, but my partner hasn't. So shouldn't that still count as their home buy? Well, to my point earlier, it does when you're having conversations with your mates at a barbecue, but is not the way the government sees it. They see it definitely different. They assess you together. So therefore, you will miss out on the incentive. So great question, Giovanni. I reckon that's helpful for a lot of other people in our community too. Thank you for sending that through.